Hi, guys. Welcome back. It is time for another book review. And today, because it is officially October, we are doing The Amityville Horror by Jay Anson. So, the reason I got onto this is because I was researching a little bit about the Satanic Panic. I had just finished watching a documentary called The Acid King, which was about Ricky Casso. He was a teenager in the north of Long Island in 1984 who killed one of his friends in the woods. And they say that that had a lot of satanic influence because he had an AC/DC shirt on. They were blaming all these kinds of popular culture references, heavy metal music. Anyway, that was only 5 to 7 years after this stuff went down. So this is Amityville Horror. This was a house where a 23-year-old guy named Robert DeFeo had killed his whole family one night. So 6 people, his dad and his mom, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. He shot them all in his house. So this was in when did he do that? He did that in November of 1974. Anyway, then this book continues because the family that moved in right after that, the Lutzes, George and Kathy Lutz, were there for 28 days after they bought this house, and they claimed that all sorts of paranormal activity happened. And in those 28 days, they made a bunch of recordings of their experiences and gave it to Jay Anson. Well, they didn't give it, they sold the rights to Jay Anson, who then made this book 2 years later after their supposed experiences. So, that's Amityville Horror. I anticipated this book to be spooky and a real life event of maybe some demons that were hanging around. But what I really kind of got out of this book, guys, was that it's a little bit of a hoax. It was creepy, crawly, kind of trumped up, a little bit of nonsense. It's pretty easy to tell after you start reading that a lot of this is embellished, right? Um, and it turns out, after doing some research after I was reading the book, that yes, there is indeed a lot of evidence of this being a bit of tomfoolery, fraud. The Lutzes tried to sue people that were involved in publishing this book for rights, right? And then other people, the lawyer who was helping them to get the rights of this book ended up suing them for reneging on their original book deal. So, and then in those trials, those lawsuit trials with the Lutzes, they admitted that the majority of everything they claimed was a fraud. So it makes sense, right? Because they came out with a movie in 1979 with James Brolin, The Amityville Horror. I have not watched that movie. I have heard that it's terrifying. The lady at Barnes and Noble, when I bought this book, she was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're reading that. I watched the Amityville Horror movie when I was a kid, and it scarred me for life. It was the scariest thing I've ever seen." So, needless to say, I am not one to scar myself for life for no reason, and it seems like it's done on purpose. It's not for any reason. If I'm going to scar myself, it better be for a good reason of like actual knowledge and gaining something, not just for the sensation of "oh, spooky." So, or because someone wants to scare me, right? Anyway, this book was a typical, I feel like, embellished horror uh, book that was not very scary for those of you who have researched real scary things. Um, Still, it's October. It's worth a read if you are going into spooky season and want to kind of change up your reading pattern a little bit. Um, Also, I know that there's a History Channel documentary. I took some notes here, but there's a 2000, the History Channel came out with a documentary called Amityville, The Haunting of Amityville, Horror or Hoax. So they're on to the Luxes that this is just for publicity and fame and money and all the benefits that came with publicizing this trumped up story. So, um, yeah, it was goofy. There's also Jay Anson, the author, I believe, was a bit of a Satanist himself. He wrote another book on another haunted house and called it 666. So there is an agenda with Jay Anson as well. That's the kind of guy he is. Additionally, someone has speculated that he wrote this book based on H.P. Lovecraft's book called The Dunwich Horror. And he wrote that in 1929. H.P. Lovecraft did. So I went into this thinking this was a true story. It's not a true story, but if you just want to read a horror movie, it was an easy read. Unlike my last book review on Frankenstein, which was the words were like coming across as honey being dripped out onto the page. It was so beautifully written and so intelligent. This is not that. It's it's much easier to read. It's very straightforward. I think that's pretty much all I have for you guys. I don't really know what else to say. There's a few other things I wanted to point out of why it's a hoax. I mean, there was some goofy stuff. There's talk of transcendental meditation being maybe the reason some of these ghosts or whatever were agitated. Like maybe we should stop the transcendental meditation, or maybe we should start it up again. Also, they hired a Catholic priest, to come and bless the house. And then the Catholic priest, his character was kind of goofy. Like he got there and was immediately scared and he didn't want to go back. And so he wasn't a very strong priest for sure. Then he went to the Catholic diocese and his bishop and asked what to do. And the bishop was like, oh, you need to call Duke University, their paranormal department, and get them to scientifically look it over. This isn't for the church. This is for science. So that's goofy. Also, if you're, a Catholic, I guess it makes sense. But of course, for the Orthodox, I'm just thinking, what church would ever be like, you should call and get a scientific Ivy League school paranormal department to go look at your house because apparently the priest blessing it didn't do any good, and we're too scared as the church to go in and deal with the demons. So that was goofy. And also, like, at one point, George, the dad in the video, or in the book, was like, well, because the Catholic priest isn't doing anything, but there was never any anger at the Catholic priest, really. He was like, well, we're going to hire my coworker's girlfriend, who's a medium, to come in and see the house. So they had this medium come in and she could, like, oh, this is bad energy. And, so the whole thing just seemed, there was goo dripping from the walls, doors slamming shut, marching bands in the middle of the night. It was it was kind of a funny read. When I talk to people about it, out in the real world, they're like, oh gosh, that's too spooky. That kind of stuff really does happen. And of course, I don't doubt that there are demons. I know for a fact there are demons, but certainly are not behaving. This story was not, just didn't all add up. People have fact checked it, and there's a story in here about a ghost that's a pig. And the little girl, who's named Melissa, she's 6 years old in the story. This is George and Kathy's daughter, who is 6 years old, said she had a friend named Jody, and Jody was a pig that only she could see. And apparently they saw hoof prints, like cloven hoof prints, running off in the snow after they hit Jody. And then someone fact checked it and realized it didn't snow the night that they were saying that it snowed. Stuff like that. What else did they say? Oh yeah, the George character would go to a local brewery called the Witch's Brew to have a beer when he was stressed out. And fact checkers went in and said there was no brewery or bar called the Witch's Brew when he was there. Also, they said that the house is buried on sacred Indian ground, where the Indians would bury their dead and have rituals and stuff. Well, somebody fact checked it and talked to the local Indians, which were the Shinnecock Indians, and they said, no, there's no burial ground under there. That's all made up nonsense. So Amityville Horror, sorry to burst your bubble. Mine was bursted. Is it bust your bubble or burst your bubble? I don't know. Please correct me in the comments. But it was an easy read, guys. How many pages was this? Like 236 pages. It'll take you a couple days, but It's fun for October. It's fun if you wanna have a couple giggles, uh, and go through this weird haunted house world. It's not scary. So, that's all I've got for you today. I have more books coming up. Let me know in the comments what you think. Happy October. It's my favorite month of the whole year, and I'll talk to you guys later.